You don't need to record me.
No?
Just nobody. I just got introduced. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's good for the whole video. So yeah, we're recording right now. All right.
Okay. Okay. It is my pleasure to invite you to the third annual Festival of American Poetry, which exists not just tonight, but tomorrow night, and I hope we will see you both evenings. We have put together some fabulous poets, the best in the country. You are not going to leave this campus without knowing something good about American poetry. I want to call your attention here. This has been a process that's been going on for well over a year. It has to do with people who are absolutely committed to poetry, who believe in it more than I can possibly express. And there are certain people whose names have to be mentioned. One of them is Christopher Sawyer-Lauçanno. One of them is Michael Franco. And one of them is Patrick Pritchard. So, go ahead.
And of course, the other name to be mentioned is Ed Foster. It's my pleasure tonight to kick off this event, fashionably late, as poetry readings generally don't start on time. And we were waiting for Patrick to arrive anyway. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Sarah Sousa. And it seems to me only fitting that Sarah is reading tonight just down the street from where Emily Dickinson wrote her poems. Dickinson's clearly one of those poets who matter to Sarah. And like Miss Emily, Sarah understands that small, often overlooked moments can actually be momentous when laid bare. And like Dickinson, her work is tight and bright. She utilizes moments in history to create stunning profiles of individuals coping with grief and loss and hope in their everyday lives. Her transcription of an 1880s diary belonging to Esther Small, a woman in her 40s who lived in Maine, is miraculous in that Sarah realized that Esther's own words were poems. And she allows us, as a result, to become privy to a gone world that maybe isn't really so gone. Her own work, in which she frequently writes poems of women from the past, in which she takes on a variety of personae, both echo and reinforce how everydayness, when isolated in some lines on a page, reverberate into our very beings. Sarah is the author most recently of See the Wolf, in which tension and trauma are related in a nexus that combines a kind of terrible beauty with woe and wonder. Her other books include Split the Crow and Church of Needles, as well as the chapbook Yale. Her poems have appeared in the Massachusetts Review, North American Review, the Southern Poetry Review, Verse Daily, and Tupelo Quarterly, among many others. Her honors include a Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship and a Massachusetts Cultural Council Fellowship. She is a member of the Board of Directors of Perugia Press. Please welcome Sarah Sousa.
So when I wear my glasses, I'll be able to see the words, but not you. But that's all right. Can I scoot this in a little? Good. That's too much. I'm going to read from See the Wolf tonight, which actually was just named a must-read book in the Massachusetts Book Awards, which I'm very excited about. So this collection is memoirish, with some myth and fairy tale about women and girls woven through. There are usually a few different themed readings that any poet can get out of a book, so I'm sticking to one theme tonight. I'm going to concentrate on a story that revolves around myself, my mother, and my sister. My mother was a single mother in the 80s, and my sister and I grew up knowing that she was sexually abused by her father as a child. It's something she always told us so that we would be safe and we wouldn't be alone with him. The effect this had on me informs the collection heavily. I don't deal directly with epigenetics, although I think that also affects the collection, and I do believe it. There were two events between the ages of 10 and 14 that I'll read about tonight. For the purposes of the collection, they seem condensed, like one happened on top of the other, but there is some time in between. It did feel quite condensed. So when I was 10, I was attacked by a dog and was hospitalized and required stitches, many stitches. And when I was around 14, my mother began dating a much younger man who had his own trauma and emotional issues, and he became obsessed with her and stalked all of us because we were still kids and living in the same house. So I'm going to read about 10 poems that stick to that theme. Self-portrait with Mabel, Rose, Lillian, Fern, Mildred, B. My mother named me Little Old Lady, named me Startle Easily, Little Flincher, Night Terrors with Spiders. I lived in a different century. I was born rural, in a city of mills. My mother named me Place of Unreachable Hills, a temperance movement of one. I was sober as spring water. I was old. Then I was older. My mother named me May Your Body Never Surprise You with Want. I was her easy pregnancy, asleep by 8, awake when convenient. I held the fetal position like a moral obligation. Her ribs were unmolested as a Victorian birdcage. They pried my soft bones like ancient pottery from between my mother's hips while she slept. An orphaned monkey, a baby of the 70s. I sucked the bright orange nipple of a sterilized glass bottle, held by some other woman, while my mother came too. She named me Mabel, Rose, Lillian, Fern, Mildred, B. Names I wear like tarnished jewelry, pinned to the inside of my bra for safekeeping. They take turns speaking through my mouth, choose my handbags, prefer flat shoes. They embody the word habit, placing a napkin atop my glass of water, one beneath to absorb the sweat. Carry a magnifying glass to read menus. With them, I'm always the youngest in the room, and nothing changes. They name me not yet born, but predict a natural birth. They ask, do you believe us? Does it help you to believe in us? Pa. His brothers called him Pete, after Peter Rabbit, a kind of joke that stuck. Sundays, my mother, grandmother, and I ate sweets, sipped tea, all of us careful not to laugh too loud or let our voices rise, because the house was just a 4-room cottage and Pa slept late. From Oklahoma, he had a drawl. Paw was a southern endearment he taught me to call him. It never felt natural. In photos, his ancestors stood barefooted in red dust outside slapped-together shacks. My mother said he'd had a hard childhood. His parents didn't even name him. Around noon, Pa would emerge from his bed, squinty-eyed, wiry gray hair standing on end. He was long and lean and sometimes mean. He scared me. Sundays, he grunted in reply to my grandmother, sliced through her cheerfulness with one cruel comment, then disappeared into the basement, where he pursued his hobbies. Or he'd linger, pacing between the small front rooms, coming near our table. Sometimes he'd want to hug me, and I would rise reluctantly, let him pull me against his sinewy body. His smell was sharp and made my heart knock. My mother looked uneasy, but laughed and chattered for my grandmother's sake. I couldn't read her. If Pa hugged me right in front of them, was that okay? We looked like someone who stays when she knows perfectly well how to run. The theme of Red Riding Hood runs through the collection, and you'll see the direct reason as I go on. This is based on the original Red Riding Hood, which, as you know, the original fairy tales were much grittier than our Disney fairy tales. And the very, very original was dated to around the 1500s. The girl, later known as Red. The way she was digested like any other meat didn't make it into Disney. Hungry, dirty, already missing teeth, she would not have grown into our heroine, even if she hadn't been killed and eaten in 1590 by a man suffering from lycanthropy. A man who believes he's a wolf must be hanged, then sliced open to see if he wears his pelt on the inside. They never found the girl whole, curled up, sleeping like a bean, and she surely didn't escape by her own wits. The original, a crude cautionary tale, based on recent gruesome murders, like girls on milk cartons, pretty hitchhikers, later found in some guy's basement, razor blades in candy apples. Sisters, 1980s. Sometimes they're Cabbage Patch plastic, sometimes figurine porcelain, Shirley temples and cherry nail polish on New Year's Eve, always awake when the ball drops. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes 2, when the mother one decides to be mother. Clean house, dust and wash the floors, on hands and knees, the rag and dragged pail behind her. When she lights the potpourri burner, they know what that means. Alone, the sisters eat all the groceries, the carbs they call starches, grow into their swear words, one fat and quiet, the little one mouthy. They develop their neuroses with help from the mother's boyfriend, the smug vice principal who's drawing the line between them and college material, the father, his girlfriend, always his girlfriend, not late to the game, she created the game. Sometimes there's Cyndi Lauper, sometimes Cindy Crawford, the glittery stickers in the sticker collection, the scented, Aquanet, Aussie, Baby Soft. They've been watching Three's Company since they were 7, General Hospital since 8, and though one is 4 years older, in the apartment alone after school, they're the same age. They know what it means when creepy Mr. Roper makes eyes at Jack and poses his hands like birds. They know that Luke was Laura's rapist. Everyone does. Woman raised, and like certain dogs, they don't trust men. They carry the key for the bolt lock. They let themselves in. This next poem was inspired by an exhibit at Mass MoCA in 2015, which commemorated the 100-year anniversary of the extinction of the passenger pigeon. So the last passenger pigeon, named Martha, was captive and died in 1915. And in the exhibit, there was a little egg cup that had the extinction date, which I guess is common to mark the extinction of a species with an object. And I thought it was just so sad, this little egg cup. I mentioned the last wild passenger pigeon in the poem, and it's inspired by a list of strange disorders. You are not grass. The last wild passenger pigeon was named Buttons because the mother of the boy who shot it stuffed the bird and sewed black buttons for eyes. People with Ekbom syndrome imagine they're infested with mites. It's possible the entire Buttons family developed Ekbom, an aspect of which is folie à deux, madness between two, where a person in contact with a sufferer develops symptoms, as in an actual infestation. All wild things have kleptophobia, the fear of being stolen, as well as cleithrophobia, the fear of being trapped. I did, after the divorce and my mother began dating, fear of being adopted by a man wearing slacks and old-fashioned shoes, who winked at me and promised to return my mother at a decent hour, whose accent was Southern, who pronounced his R's so long they became words in their own right, words at the ends of words. His R's like grappling hooks, like a crocodile purse with yellow eyes. Why is the fear of being trapped a clinical phobia, while the compulsion to slit and stuff a thing not listed in the DSM? Nature permanence is the healthy acceptance that you are not grass, but human. Beneficial if you suffer from hylophobia, fear of trees. Not so helpful if you have Cotard delusion and know you're not only human, but a corpse. Related to Cotard is xenomelia, the feeling that one's limbs don't belong to the body. Chirophobia, fear of hands, and worse, apodomenophilia, where a person disowns the limbs, yearns to live life as an amputee. Why the insistence that an animal have black buttons, yellow marbles, keyholes for eyes? That its entrails be replaced with horsehair and rags? That the peppery dots swarming the blanket aren't mites? What are the chances that a man who flashes his teeth when he talks doesn't bite? To fear is animal. To create out of fear must be human. Slits to let the mites out. Steel shot like beautiful beadwork, studding lavender breasts. Phantom limbs, when real hands become too dangerous. And the title of the next poem is the first word. Red smear in the wolf's throat. In one version, she's found in the company of wolves, not in their stomachs, bedraggled but dozing like the offspring of wolves on the wiry back of an alpha. In the traditional version, after flirting with danger, after giving up grandmother's coordinates, knowing the wolf will await her, after the seduction, the devouring, she chooses survival. Or maybe she chooses both, wants first to feel herself held in the wolf's throat. Which version has her punching holes in the wolf's stomach with a pencil, snatched from the bedside table when she knew the roost was up, and scribbled a note for help, as if writing the fragment of a dream for later? In my version, I'll include how it feels to be eaten. The entering isn't clean. Teeth are like dull keys. The wolf opens you to your own red glister, like a docent of the body. The title of this is a little obscure if you don't remember the instance, but there was a comedian who made this joke back around the time that the movie Thelma and Louise came out, and he just laughed and said, "Oh, everyone thinks Thelma and Louise are so beautiful and such a big deal, and they're just two white heifers." It was a young black comedian, and I just remember, I don't know why it stuck in my head. I guess I remember thinking, I thought they were beautiful. As a young, I was probably like, 12. I don't know how old I was. I might say in the poem. So that's what the title refers to. To the comedian who called Thelma and Louise two white heifers. My mother dreamed of wrenching jaws open with her small hands. I could see it gave her some pleasure, a pleasure all women share, imagining their strength in the face of danger. My moments as prey were too recent. I didn't wear the dog's hide beneath my clothes for power, though he had been put to sleep. No one offered it to me. I wore an ugly scar from 17 stitches. a tender pink entry wound newly sealed, a mark that said good eating. I startled every time I heard a keychain jingle. Dog loose. I'd climb my mother like a tree. If the dog materialized, worse, if it advanced growling, my mother would stand in front of me, arms splayed as if she were guarding someone in a basketball game. But she wasn't fucking around. My mother had practiced the maneuvers in her sleep. The way she grasped the upper jaw with her right hand, the lower with her left, and leveraged her weight at the hinges to crack the skull wide like a bivalve shell. Don't laugh. Women have driven off cliffs, burned men in their beds to escape. Her body over my body, my mother and the dog would face off. I could feel the answering growl start deep inside her, erupting in a voice not my mother's, a voice to make us larger than we were, stronger than a scream, she'd said. A man laughed at us once, but it wasn't him the dog obeyed. The flame. We hid at the neighbor's apartment one over, the woman who introduced me to the 500-calorie-a-day diet when I was 13, teaching me the lifetime skill of micromanaging what I put in my mouth. Because he smashed the Visions cookware he gave us for Christmas, set of smoke glass pans that afforded a window onto the food's transformation as it cooked. They were supposed to be shatterproof. The box said, and plainly illustrated, that even the heat of a flame under a pan of ice wouldn't cause a crack, as though the ice, the pan, or flame itself understood self-restraint. But he smashed them, then cut himself with the pieces in the upstairs bathroom. Blood on the vanity our mother kept so clean. At 3 o'clock, General Hospital. At 4, Phil Donahue. By the time the evening news came on at 5, we figured it was safe. Mom cleaned the blood and glass, but not before we three crammed in the doorway to see what we were dealing with and make a plan to spend less time at home. 1 week at Dad's, 2 with friends in another state. Did we think he'd never return? That we'd baffle him with our absence? We stoked the flame. Don't you forget about me. I was 14 that hot July night at the drive-in watching The Breakfast Club, you and my mother entwined up front. You were fun, you were young. You would become obsessed and want to kill us, but this was before all that. 3 of us eating popcorn in the unlit car. If I had to choose, I'd say you were the line, "Don't you forget about me," in the Simple Minds song, while I took "Will you stand above me" and worked it into nightmares. A dark figure in an idling car, a dark figure at the door, in the house. I was murdered in myriad ways. Suffocation, fire, gunshot to the head. Maybe you didn't realize that a daughter is housed inside her mother, like the smallest Matryoshka doll, the pea-sized one. The way she looks out from the same eyes, how a threat to one is a threat to the other. But you were young, closer to my age than my mother's, and you were fun when you weren't harming us. I kept the memory of that night long past its usefulness. Summer's short heat and the 3 of us singing, "Don't, don't, don't, don't." An emergency is happening. He burned it. What did he burn? Our car. I think it's our car. The apartment's alarm is so loud it splits its own skull. Air raid loud. This is an emergency. I am unsafe. He burned something. I think he burned the car. The neighbors are coming out wearing thin pajamas into the cool night, the smoky air. They're alarmed. Something's burning. Something is on fire. Is our apartment on fire? The walls are cinder block, fireproof, but something is on fire. A steeple of flame reaches up into the trees, singeing the leaves, singing that oxygen-gorged high-pressure hymn, and pop, the windows go. It's our car. The vinyl dashboard and the plastic parts are melting. The binder for history I left on the back seat. What about the gas tank? We all step further back. I am barefoot in the street. I am unsafe. But the car is wholly brilliant with flame, irretrievably on fire. My mother doesn't scream or cry. When she moves her mouth, it says, "My car is on fire." "This is so stupid," my sister says. In the distance, sirens homing in. "Here they come," someone shouts. It's a party, fueled with gasoline, adrenaline. The tires are melting. Inside me, someone wound one of those matchbox cars beyond tight, cranked back past the click that means it's broke, a piece of junk, won't go. But it goes. Wheels and engine, wheels and burning engine, it goes. This is the last poem. The word metempsychosis is the transfiguration or the transformation of the soul from its current body into another, or from its current species into another, so from human to animal. It's basically a poem of dissociation. So in trauma, you know that dissociation you experience where you can't even locate yourself, and that's what I was getting at. Codeine metempsychosis. Doubled in the bed, I couldn't fathom my extremis. I turned to glass, took care not to thrash too much, thrashed, picked shards of me out of the mattress. Something pierced my thigh, a stitch, sharp ceiling of smoke glass descended, collapsed. I can't breathe. Someone lurked in the corner. "Is that me?" I called. I was of two skins. Something climbed into the bed beside me. In fever, I went so far inside myself I slipped the barrier of me. I split in fourths, eighths, sixteenths, shaved thin as a finch which flies straight into the glass. I see the reflection of my finch determination, beak-driven, coming at my face. Over and over, my small body dropped to the frozen ground, froze fast. My miraculous feathers no more than winter waste, leaf matter, seed head, grass. I formed a thin trickle, a diurnal stream of me, here, 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 and here. I queued up, touched down in each of me. Yes, 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 that's me. Has your dog had its rabies shot? No response. So I kept calling into the void. Your dog just ate a piece of me. Does he have rabies? Nothing. He won't come back, will he? Mom, I'm scared he'll come back. Can we get bolt locks and a chain? Bulletproof glass. Mom, Mom, oh Mom, you've eaten the poisoned crumbs, not intended for you. Wake up, I'm having my worst nightmare. I could follow the thin trail of you home, but he knows where we live. Thank you.
I was lucky in that when I was in high school, I had a magnificent teacher who, when we were all in our, I think either our junior or senior year, came to us and said, "There's this program on about Gertrude Stein tonight, and you have to go watch it." And I remember being stunned by this was a Perry Miller Adotto film, which has had an immense influence on documentary making. But in that, she talked about Stein's idea of the composition in which we live. And that notion, being 17 years old, I sort of grabbed hold of as sort of a token center of my world where I wanted to find that composition in which we live. Well, that sounds great, but then, things are swirling by you, you have no idea, or you're left out of things and you don't know what's going on. But slowly as I got older, I started to mark those places, and I would leap when I would see them. It was few and far between, but I got into the habit of grabbing hold of those people that emerged into that composition, that were making my composition, that were pushing me along, that were exciting me in that romantic way that I had from Stein of everybody sitting around the table. I always said that everybody wanted to sit at that table, but they wanted to be sure that Picasso was sitting next to them before they would agree to come to dinner. You know, and I said that it doesn't work that way. You end up sitting at a bar or at a table, and suddenly you're talking to somebody that you realize is actually really doing the work. And that's why I'm really happy to be able to come and introduce Ms. Cook to you as somebody that emerged in that way to me. We were just reminiscing about this. It was over tables, sitting around with a bunch of people after readings, that I was talking to her and her husband and realizing at that point we were both childless, which is really horrifying, seeing that my child is standing back there as an adult. And we were talking, and I realized here's a person. Here's an actual, real, decent, sweet, wonderful person who has a voraciousness to her that I deeply admired. And this is all without any poetry involved in this. And slowly I watched her own circulation begin to center itself around our dear friend Garrett Lansing, who I think you would not be offended if I named him one of your masters, as he was all of us. Garrett would never want to be anybody's master. Yeah. Well, you do now. But Garrett, as William Corbett was for many of us in town, were this wonderful master that didn't want to be a master. That the idea was do the work. And the excitement that Garrett engendered in all of us was extraordinary. And I watched Amanda come to that, recognize it, and embrace it in ways that I could go on for the next hour telling you about. And slowly but surely, her own work started to emerge out of that. And I mean, to cut over a number of years in the chase, Ironstone Whirligig, when it first presented itself, again in the pages of Mr. Torres magazine, I believe is the first I would have seen it, was hinted at breathtaking. And I immediately said, when you get this together, come read, please. And her reading at my series in town was absolutely breathtaking. It's a magnificent book. It is the composition in which we live, in all of its wonderful splendor. I consider you a working poet. She's a mother. She works. She works with the Gloucester Writers Center. And Henry Farini being another one of the people that she came into touch with. And she's currently, and I am deeply excited about this, working on the letters for Olson, letters to Maximus, which when one thinks of the myriad of addresses and assaults on Charles Olson that we've watched come up over the last 10 years, this is a real one. This is a real addressing by somebody who is in the place, who is living in the world that Olson developed, and is addressing it from the point of view of somebody her age, somebody her sex, and somebody who is an active poet who's pushing the grounds of the composition in which we live. So it is a great pleasure to welcome her here tonight. Please welcome Amanda Cook.
Thank you, Michael. And Michael thankfully did the hard work of telling you the things I'm reading from. I'm going to read part from Ironstone Whirligig, which is a sort of poetic prose memoir dealing very much with my children and with my mother, my children growing and my mother falling away. And you'll have to forgive me, I haven't read any of it since my mother's death. So if I get a little teary, it's fine. This is from Ironstone Whirligig. Tuesday, May 15th. A cool morning, rain falling on yesterday's laundry. Last night the air was full of blossoms. It made a kind of mischief in me, like May Day girls dancing in white. It felt like cherry blossoms, and cherry blossoms feel like you. I tried to call you, dropping Garrett off as the late morning sun broke through the rain, looking back through his jungle, the taste of sorrel in my mouth. The air smelled like rain and rain on earth, and I missed you. I dialed your number. That is all that came of it. Tuesday, July 17th, Tuesday morning again. It always seems to come. The babies are coughing, doctor in the afternoon. Find a hammer, do all the chores that need a hammer. Fix the curtain rod, pound a loose nail. If I had 20 minutes, I would pull the dried peas out of the garden. I would water the plants, pick flowers. Find a pen, do all the chores that need a pen. Thank you notes, bills, make a list of things to do. If I had 20 minutes, I would piece together a picture of fabric, black and white and red like I am thinking of you, right angles and spirals, black and white. Turn the computer on, do all the chores that require a computer, check email, reply to friends, waste time. If I had 20 minutes, I would tell the birds stories that would make them grow teeth to bite the stones from cherries. Thursday, September 27th. The thing about letting everything go to seed is that the birds love it. They hop about the yard, past the mustard and the thistle. The whole thing is a place to hide. Reading translations in the tub after everyone else is asleep. I'm not sure where I fit into it, the elbows and the wool, but the piece of it. I have been ignoring my mother lately. That is not true. What I should say is that sometimes when I wake at night, I let myself think of something else, and I am happy. Friday, October 19th. Stepping outside this morning, it feels like spring. The birds singing in the bushes, a lightness in the air, a new crop of peas coming in the pots by the stairs. We are dancing in the kitchen, a baby on each hip, singing in full voice. We are eating root vegetables and ripe pears. I am remembering how important it is to hear your name spoken out loud. Saturday, December 29th. 2 days after Christmas and the emergency room is full. She didn't know what she was doing, a week's worth of pills. 42 pills, a week's worth. In the next room, a man has taken something and fallen off of a fishing boat. He is cold. He screams for 2 hours while they try to figure out his name. Down the hall, a little girl is so sick they send her straight to Children's. An old woman wanders from room to room doing EKGs. We watch as her heart speeds up and slows down. We wait to be moved. A woman with chest pains sits and waits alone. A man with a blown-out knee waits on the stretcher. The next day, when I go to the hospital to visit, I find a slide on the wet pavement. The corner of the public garden by Beacon and Arlington. The corner I sat in so many times. The edge of the statue shows, and I remember what it says. Neither shall there be any more pain. This is Tuesday, April 24th. Sometimes it's Monday and you wake up with dread in your throat and you're thankful it's a school lunch your kids will eat and you can't find their folder and it's Monday and it's raining, but you make the bus and after you feel like giving up, so you call a friend and it's Monday. She meets you for coffee and you haven't seen her since Friday and not last Friday, and you talk and it all feels better, and you go home to Monday and make the calls you don't want to make, like the vet because your cat has cancer and the tumor is growing into her eye, and the pediatrician because your kid has fluid in his left ear, and the insurance company because they made the check out wrong and now you are short $900, and you call the editor of the local paper because they pissed you off, and you leave a message because it is Monday morning. And you go to the vet and the cat bleeds all over everything, and you ask when is the right time and they don't tell you, and you pay $100, and then you come home to drop off the cat and go to Marshall's to buy socks to bring to your mom, and when you get there she is crying. She is always crying every Monday. And you feed her fatty pot roast and mashed potatoes and shoot until she won't open her mouth, and you walk with her around and around, and Fred, the Eugene O'Neill scholar who taught your friends, sits in the hall, and he calls Olive a bothersome bitch, and she is, so you laugh. And you sing to your mother, you sing songs she sang to you, you sing little boxes on the hillside, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and Fred sings along, and he claps his hand, and he bangs his tray for the first time, and they're all made just the same. You leave right at 2, get the kids, bring them to the doctor, and you talk to the school nurse about how stupid a stupid book was, and the kids come down the hall in their raincoats and into the car and go to the doctor's where they don't see fluid, and your son fails a hearing test in his left ear, but he gets a sticker, and you go home and pick all the girly clothes from your daughter's dresser to be passed along. because she isn't girly anymore, and you start to make dinner, and you burn it, and your daughter spills her milk, and the whole thing is a mess of messes until the kids go up to bed, and you take a quick bath, shave your legs, don't wash your hair, clean the sink, and go upstairs. You hang up the clothes at the foot of the bed, pick a dress for tonight, and shoes, heels, and a sweater, make the kids' lunches, and leave. Monday night, now the bar filling, friends and musicians, and kids young enough you don't care what they think, and beer tonight, drinking, knitting out, and a book to return, and someone says they wish they had a washboard, and you have one in the car, so you go get it, and he plays it with your keys, the old washboard from a friend's garage, and you buy drinks and stand up because it is Monday, and you are tired, and the kids get up to play the weight and fisherman's blues, and you decide not to sit down, more beer and dancing with the girls, and at the end they play songs for you, dirty rock and roll, and you friends play the washboard and sing Bowie, and you dance until you notice your feet hurt, and you remember working 10 hours tomorrow on the same feet, and you slow. It is Tuesday now, Tuesday, and Monday was all right. Tuesday, January 6th. All of a sudden, the night isn't young. I forgo all that is left undone, the cleaning, the responding, the bills, and the work, so that years from now, my daughter will remember me playing the fiddle downstairs while she was falling asleep. So that's some of Ironstone Whirligig. And now we get to the fun of Charles Olson. It's a rockin' good time. Growing up in Gloucester, as a writer, Charles Olson was always looming over me. I mean, he loomed large anyway, but I realized at a certain point I was going to have to deal with him if I was ever going to help other people deal with him. And I had a lot to say. So the form of this piece is I'm reading the Maximus poems, and I'm writing a reaction to each of the poems. They're not, I'm not following line for line. They're not necessarily the same subject. They're my reaction given what's going on in the world while it's happening, while I read them, what's happening in my life. Well, if you really love Olson, I hope you forgive me. If you have your pocket Maximus on you, we're starting with letter 7, and I'm skipping around a little bit. Letter 7. This carpenter who saw tansy, how could he have seen it first? The first to see tansy take root? Garrett's told me, gently, that I am not so right about tansy. Not wrong, maybe, but not so right. I expect whomever was here watching tansy take root before the carpenter arrived knew how to use it. 1. This carpenter who made things out of wood and who owned the land of the cut, and Al Gorman who kept sugar from his sister, and Mason Andrews, are they the cracks, the seams? This commerce, this making and displaying, this keeping sugar from one's sister, this is American savage. 2. I have a photograph of my mother at Whale's Jaw. She is a child. She looks not like she has conquered it, rather like she is visiting an old friend. Her siblings hang from the trees around her. Whale's Jaw is broken now, cracked. Some man or other made a fire beneath her, and she split. I heard his name once, the man who broke her. I did not remember it, nor was I surprised. 3. My hands are short, stubby, peasant hands, hands made for work. My mother's hands were small, covered in paint. Before she painted, she worked in cloth. Her hands, too, refused women's flesh. Letter 10. Cod or God, power or power. Let's not fool ourselves into thinking either is sacred. 1. At a restaurant downtown, they have a drink named the Suriname Sling. The Cape Ann Museum tore down the Pierce Haskell House without noting its ties to the slave trade. Those great houses lining Middle Street, those captains weren't dealing in fish. 2. There is no 2 in this poem, but in the middle of writing mine, I have folded 3 loads of laundry and peeled a Tootsie Roll off the living room floor. 3. When I leave my city and come back again, I am struck by how different Gloucester is, how separate. There is a danger in idealizing it. Just last week, a drunk stumbled down Rogers Street in a shirt marked "Black Lives Don't Matter." 4. Salem's a simulacrum. In that game, the holding out, we have won. We keep our sins neatly swept under the rug and don't offer tours on the hour. Maximus to Gloucester, letter 11, in which I swing from angry to sentimental. That rock, I once looked over and saw my daughter, not yet 10, climbing the face of that great rock. I didn't yell for fear of startling her. I spent my childhood climbing that rock, but the gentler slope, and most often the stairs carved out of the back. I have called the DPW to have a bench placed at Stagefort Park to mark my father's life. He is buried in West Gloucester by the marsh past Bond Hill. My mother won't die, can't die. I could get a bench for her anyway. 1. Tragabixanda. Our own magic word, our secret history, the street sign all the kids stole, until some man came from out of town and tried to give us our own history wrapped up in song and dance. He used that word as a password, stole it, took the cool right out of it. 2. In which my anger returns. It is a difference in values, I suppose. Those of us that make note of what we feed the sick and dying, that caretaking is another kind of attention. 3. We cut it close. Close, closed, we close off. I have a fierceness in me I let out if someone I love is hurt. I inherited this from my grandmother, who would mutter "God damn it" under her breath as she walked around the house. You, Captain, can I call you Captain? You have navigated into my waters. Maximus to himself. I have made my life out of the simplest things: a cup of coffee, a ball of yarn, a simple song sung under my breath. My life is full of ideas: laundry baskets, dirty dishes in the sink, a jar of wilting roses. I can almost imagine you standing, saying your words as I stand holding a basket of clean clothes against my hip, waiting to be dismissed. This morning the air was so cold the harbor was full of sea smoke. It rose around 10-Pound Island, meeting the clouds that hung at the horizon. I drove home knowing there was hot coffee in the pot. Maximus to Gloucester, letter 15. Some sons talk about their fathers. Some sons keep quiet. Sometimes all we are left are stories to reconstruct. 1. It is a gift knowing when to be quiet, when to use your voice. 2. There is broken glass at the base of Tablet Rock. I listen for the children as they climb, no, run up the side. A tree grows from the split in the rock. I used to tell the kids to be careful. I don't bother anymore. 3. I am skipping 3, keeping quiet as it were. 4. Some of us have worked the whole time. Letter 16. We have more, I hope, than how we make money, more than our things. We are more than we make. 1. We can talk about what it means to lead, what it means to be a leader. We can talk about money and trusts, and we can talk about pejorocracies. We would be talking, I think, about men. At least now, when we have dismissed a woman for being too sly and put in her place a fool ready to make America great. How do we find good men? How do we make them? How can we keep men good? They spoil so quickly. The rocks from Cressy's beach are all over the grass. The man-made wall couldn't hold back the storm. 2. This country, motherfucker, they have pulled the rug from under our feet. 3. Hush, we are talking back. Maximus to Gloucester, letter 15, revisited. I would be lying if I told you I started this with an open mind. Maybe that's not right. Maybe it was open, but it was set on something in particular, even if I couldn't name it. There are bits of you, your story, that you had no hand in. I am sure this is true for all of us. There are noises coming from every room in my house. I am going to pour another cup of coffee and make a Manhattan and hope that it will help me continue. 1, I haven't written in some time. I haven't told you Garrett died. There it is. I don't know why I held this, but I couldn't write more until I told you. Like I can't listen to my messages anymore. I haven't listened since the week after he died. Why bother? What am I going to hear? I don't know that I will ever listen again. 2, Smythe and Standish, Standish and Smythe. I have been rudderless for months. I don't want another navigator. I want a chart, a sextant, a clear sky. I wonder what I want to be. The thing I keep coming to? I want to be quiet. The seas were calm, the wind was fair, that made me so secure. I am leaving time to grieve. I don't want to rush into some harbor. I have nothing in my hold, nothing to sell on shore. I am hollow. My ribs creak and ache with the waves. That beacon above the harbor, that beacon is gone. I have a piece of glass stuck in my foot. There is no tool better for finding broken glass than bare skin. I don't mind. It reminds me that things break. People break. I break. 3, I don't know what to make of it, what comes of it. I have the broom Garrett gave me when we bought our house. When that broom is out of straw, I don't know what I will do. I can't stop sweeping, although the floor looks like I have. I will finish my coffee and my Manhattan, and I will sweep the floor. 4, oh poets, you poets. I want to say something here about tenderness, about listening to Annie and Hetty, and about Dale's talk about your letters with Duncan. This may not be the poem for it, but I want to say it now, in case I can't find the tenderness later. I am tender now, sore even. Poets, let yourselves, let each other be tender. On first looking out through Juan de la Cosa's eyes. 1, rough seas. See, before we have a map munda, we still have our feet on the ground. 2, and the gods willed he could leave her. So it has been, so it shall be. Slide into port, set an anchor, and whore. 2, fishy business, says Terranova. I am not saying anything new. This discovery, this conquest, this hard gale land, we tie it to the names of men. I think of Tragabigzanda. 1, is she an apple? A pear? What shape do her nipples take? Respect her. She lost her pearls to a worm. 2, the families who can afford bouquets needn't send their men in ships chasing cod. 3, you have no monopoly on the truth. I think this is the last. Letter 20, not a pastoral letter. 1, how your own child awakes, how you have slumbered. Last night too little, and lately too well, waking with the first sound of the birds through the open window, then staying, waiting until my children climb in with me, then soundly again with the sound of their breathing. My mother died between that last poem and this. I am avoiding a lot of things. I can't avoid that. She worked in fabric, my mother. I have a studio full of her fabric. By her death, she had lost every bit of herself save her body. 2, this poem is a standoff. You have polis in your eyes. Mine are wet with kaiho. I carry your book like a weight to bars, to work, to soccer practice. It takes so long to make the next poem. This is, even as I carry your tome, my poem. 3. When my stepfather cleaned out my childhood home, he had his workers put so many of her things, our things, on the side of the road. A neighbor let me know. Between the lunch shift and the dinner shift I was working, I drove to Lanesville, filled my car, and emptied it into my house 3 times. This was years before my mother died. He sold the house to a fish smoker named Sasquatch. I don't think it was his to sell. 4. Our childhood was spent fishing for change. My mother was just starting to have money when she started losing her mind. I have a change purse and another filled with quarters and a $10 bill. I'll treat, she would say, pulling out a change purse as I slipped the waitress my money. 5. Men who keep pawns. I could end this here if I thought the men who keep pawns or use pawns or play that particular game with people could see themselves in it. In the annotated edition of this poem, I will make note of my body, of the way men keep women, of the way my mother was kept alive for years, and how the man who kept her had the authority to do so. 6. He is, you are, a model of a certain kind of success. 2. I am trying these days to make do with less. My life is full of hand-me-down splendor. I could show you where the best blueberries in Dogtown grow. I will keep it to myself. 1. I stand up straight like my back is against the wall. Thank you.
I'm actually glad Ros is next because I can continue my theme of the composition, because Ros indeed was one of the faces that at the reading series I ran kept showing up over and over again. Never asked me for a thing, never asked for a reading. I don't believe you ever even told me at that time that you were writing. And after the series ended, I received one postcard. This is a 10-year-long series that I ran. And it simply said, "What happened? I missed your series." And I remember sitting with my wife saying, it's little things like this that, make one want to do this, that, somebody cared enough to sit down and, and write me a postcard. So time passes, and finally I get to be introduced both to Ros as a person, and we started to socialize a little bit, and then slowly but surely to her poetry. And the poetry, to me, is one of those markers. I think as we all work, there's the poets we love, there's people we admire, there's work that we see that's really good, but it's not our thing. But then there is a whole separate area of work for me, which is the work that is pushing at the boundary that I thought I was pushing at. And when I look at Ros's work, I realize that in the approach to the field, that would include Susan Howe and Robert Duncan and Ray Armentrout and Rachel Blau du Plessis as people that are her immediate antecedents. She is out there, as far as I'm concerned, pushing at that boundary in a way that is remarkable to me, and kind of puts a marker down as that place. Can I get there? I don't know, but I know she's there, and it's wonderful to watch her work out there. Please welcome Ros Zimmerman.
Thank you, Michael. Composition and pushing and being out there. Well, this is going to be an experiment for me. I know as I was driving out here, I was thinking about whether I wanted to give an explanation to what I'm about to perform, but I think that it's better not to, except to say that I was born on Fairweather Street, and here I am in Fairweather Hall, and something about the atmosphere is definitely related to this poem, Continued Disturbances. Pattern is in effect, continued disturbances, wind, sown over the eye of, in the eye of, observance, observed, where wayward, then rising and falling, along these south, east lines, approaching, likely to remain, north, fog in the distance, news, patchy fog, icy fog, sky obstructed, haze, troughs and ridges, push of possibility, uprising, downward lies, and then tacks back, spins out, possible flash enhances risk, preceding funnel clouds, drawing knots, energy out of the east, north, rising. This aids in becoming that, amplified next week. When retrogrades dampen, vortex emerges over anomalies as cyclogenesis thus deepens west. Temperature flips degree from a negative to an energy state. Its unsettled pushes. Rebound. intermittent highlights and hazards, cannot rule out squall, mean approaching, above and below normal, sandwiched here, there, in between, party, mesoscale bands form mist in this visibility reduced by smoke. Frontal system as it continues to block sky, rise, steadily fall, penetrate, 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 fall. Well, inland, ahead of this, dust, swirl, dust, swirl, dust, swirl, dust, swirl, dust, swirl, dust. Swirl dust, swirl dust, swirl dust, swirl dust, swirl dust, swirl dust,
Can we take a 10-minute break?
We have a second. Yes, this 6-minute break. Fantastic.
Okay, shall we reconvene? Yes. So I'd like first to thank Thomas, who is making the tapes of these, and they're then going to be available on the web. So when that is done, you can go to YouTube and see it again. So anyway, right now, a graduate of Harvard with an MFA from Sarah Lawrence and a second degree from the Pratt Institute, Stephanie Strickland was formerly a librarian at Sarah Lawrence, where she was a women's studies reference specialist and has held teaching positions at the Georgia Institute of Technology, Boise State University, the University of Montana at Missoula, Columbia College in Chicago, and the University of Utah. She is the author of 10 books of poetry, the most recent of which is Ringing the Changes, being published this month. And Catherine Hales says of the book that combining the science of permutations with the art of brilliantly crafted selections, it showcases the unique skills that make Strickland's work both powerful, suggestive, and wonderfully illuminating. Difficult at times, but always rewarding and entirely worth the effort required, her poetry can be deeply meditative. It is no surprise to find Simone Weil and Emily Dickinson echoed there. According to a recent interview in Countertext, Strickland is, quote, an acclaimed poet with collections that, among other defining interests, turn on subjects like women's experience, the life of Simone Weil, but one whose long-standing concern with the ways in which science, mathematics, poetry, the arts, history, and ecology are elementary integrated to each other has meant that her work commits to digital forms and an inhabiting of multi-registered discourse. Marjorie Perloff, our most insightful critic and a good friend, said of Strickland's True North that it is, quote, a profound meditation on history and geography, time and eternity, number and a state beyond number. It is a superb book. And Stephen Tomasola said of her new and selected How the Universe is Made, published this year, quote, from its soulful Big Bang, through perhaps the first serious poetry to explore the emerging implications of the digital age for poetics, to the inner body of her new work, her spare words evoke strong, Emily Dickinson-like responses while generating a contemporary synthesis of scientific, human, and poetic discourses. Prescient then, head-on, relevant to the science saturated now, Stephanie Strickland's poetry speaks as no other to how we understand our world. It is a prodigiously intelligent and insightful poetry of which I stand in awe.
Watch this chord. Yeah, right, exactly what we need. I'm sitting here looking at it going, oh no.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ed, for that introduction and for the invitation and for your creation of this festival, which I'm glad to see is seeming like it's going to be an ongoing thing, which is wonderful. I'm going to read 9 poems tonight. Paul Celan said, I cannot see any basic difference between a handshake and a poem. This is my handshake. 1. I live in a splendid city, capital of capital, ruinful, ruinous, ruin us, New York. Plastered, painted, dripping with myopic gold at dawn. Rivers of tall glass gold, even with my glasses on. Green carbon footprint in imperial minim. Sky spectrum at sunset, ravishing, toxin-induced blue fumous purple. 2, I am as alone as survival permits. Not at all, and quite a bit. Only my afflicted daughter more so. Hidden in a land of flaunted wealth, organ rebellion, no sight safe. Neural paroxysms gag on water, choke on air. Biointegrity fails to adapt. Extended care. 3, Fey folk, we sprites inside Lily of the Valley cordon by the garage on the way to the back alley, beneath the raised screen porch, stopping the jalopy with built-up petals to discover garnets, grenadine, black currant eyes, and a twirl upon twirl of lace, Queen Anne's in a meadow. Oh, of course not a meadow, some back lot, some abandoned weed field. No one liked it then, but she and me. The aimless caravanning, elvishness, still alive. Elvishness is alive in electronics, and I'll talk about that later. Electronics is based on quantum mechanics, which is really about the strangeness of touch. If I hold a coffee mug, the feeling of contact comes from repulsion between electrons in my fingers and those in the mug. Electrons cannot bear direct contact. 2 dragons keep a pearl in the air untouched. If yes, then no. If no, then yes. Untouchable between them, sustained between them, perhaps the flow of air, each guarded by 9 more, rampant, ready should one falter perhaps, at long last able to withdraw untouched into stones to function there, mapped by slow domain. If no, let's say this, How the Universe is Made is a volume of new and selected poems. It draws from 8 books, 11 digital poems, and new work. What runs through them all, from Give the Body Back to The Body Obsolete, is concern for embodiment, the malleability, the hackability of the body. The 2 most personal poems I've written about race came from dreams. This one in Salt Lake City. It's called Black / White. Meter maid screaming, wah wah, brass, mutes, gag, swallow, gel, cling, flame. Vet, cemetery in the Wasatch. Chestnuts, flags, brick, unutterable softness, low down wall, climb in, climb over, quiet, split, spilt, silt, domino, drama, disappeared, trousers afloat, float in the moonlight, button black, a shadow, drowned and soaking white in the moonlight, haunt, haint, zomboid, flow of clothes, in the twofold, torn, fold, tangled, river entangled, pole, pier. My mother's body. Moved through like a dune, become the sweep of a palm through sand. My mother's body became like sand, breached, a memory of outline. Her lungs fill with water, a hull overturned, sails filling with water, toss, stiffen in the sunlight, again submerge. Breath at long intervals, needle flow of bubbles in the respirator. Pure oxygen forced through her mouth, drying her lips. Look, I've brought gloss, pomade. I know you don't want smell. No, this has no scent, no color. Only her eyebrows. Don't wash off my eyebrows, she says. They are like wings of soft brown powder that go nowhere, stopped at the arch in flight. This room crowds her so, even its light. I push back the flowers. She loves my father. She opens her arms as if the tubes and bandages and wires were Titania's cape in the moonlight. Tell me about writing. But I could not tell her. I once tried looking for a woman's language, which led me to write this poem about an actual scholarly book, Deringer's The Alphabet, a Key to the History of Mankind. On first looking into Deringer's The Alphabet, a Key to the History of Mankind, I wanted a cuneiform, a woman's form of writing, and thought perhaps cuneiform it, so tactile the script, palpable wedges pressed in wet clay, writing at once as a fresco is painted. But in this book, in the pictographs that underlie cuneiform, there's only one sign for woman, pudendum. Slave girl and male servant also given by genital description. Man is head with mouth in it, plus beard. I thought, apart from Deringer's claim, origin of alphabets, this script is just one instance. Hieroglyphic determinatives for man and woman in Egypt look more matched, both stick figure-like, both kneeling on one shin, except the woman has longer hair, no arms, no difference between first and second person singular. How quietly here ancient grammar states what our marital law or canon teaching on abortion legislates. I am not only yours, but you. I began to wonder whether somewhere in the world different thinking existed. Flipping through the book, I was struck by Chinese trigrams, their elegant abstraction. Just 3 lines above each other meant, the footnote said, sky and dry and prime and creative, grandfather life. Slashed into 6 little lines, the sign meant secondarily and destruction and foreboding and grandmother and earth. Later Chinese for man, an upright stroke, hook rising to the left. For woman, a buckling crook, large bundle at the shoulder. Woman next to woman, meaning quarrel. And man next to word, meaning true. I did find toward the end one group of people, the Yao or Miao Tzu tribe, called by the Chinese wild southern barbarians. 50,000 in Vietnam and Laos before our war. The Yao had, I found nowhere else, 4 different signs of equal complication. Mother, father, person, heart. But as I said, wiped out. This poem is in 6 tiny numbered parts. I'll read the numbers. It's called Evil is External. 1. Evil is external to itself. Where it is not felt. It is felt where it is not. The feeling of evil is not to evil. Where it is the God-blaming criminal. Where it is not. 3. A woman feeling in her body what the rapist denies. Denies hoarding, denies passing on because 4. He does not feel it. She feels it. The whole weight of his force and his forgetfulness. 5. It stops with her. It stops her. No one wants to see it. To see it is against the soul's 6. Aspiration. Ergo, she is beaten or killed or stoned or shunned. I dedicate that to the Supreme Court. One woman who influenced me so much, I wrote a whole book about her, The Red Virgin, is Simone Weil, and this is a poem from her section of How the Universe is Made. It's called Necessity. If the sea should alter the long movement of its waves to spare a boat, it would not be beautiful. But being at every point obedient to infinitesimal pressure of wind, water, light, being nothing but obedient, it moves us. We are moved to venture on it, not because the sea will part. heart for us. This poem is called Burning Briar, Scanning Tunnel. The Big Dipper, often called the drinking gourd, was used by those escaping north to locate the pole star. Burning Briar is the elven name for the dipper. Scanning tunneling microscopes are how scientists reach into touch matter, for instance, in 1989, spelling out IBM in 33 xenon atoms. Burning Briar, Scanning Tunnel. There is a zombie at the wheel who finds acceptable all risk. His flesh looks like mine. A crinkle monkey in the swamp, mind tricky and brisk. His moves feel like mine. Headless mannequin draped, white print snakeskin dress. Pale fakery filling me with dread. A boneless man used up by operatic juggernaut. Scrivener like me. The one who hoped to poach cockroach strategy adrift. Like me, time amnesic, overreaching. Cord cut all, beyond the call to heal or heal. Fold, molt, wormhole, crush, crash, course. In that spirit of crushing change, I'm going to talk about a digital poem which acknowledges crushing forces print cannot accommodate. I need a little bit of water. See and Spar Between, which I created with Nick Montfort, creates a collaboration between Emily Dickinson and Herman Melville. The title comes from Dickinson, and the whole poem is created from a very small number of words taken from the text of Moby Dick and the poems of Dickinson. Nonetheless, the generative procedure that creates this poem results in a work that shatters any human frame of reference. Not only does its trembling swiftness make reading difficult, but inspecting every four-line stanza would take 214 million years at 15 seconds per stanza. Of course, Nick says you can read them faster. We learned a lot about words used by one of these writers and never by the other. For instance, nosegay, nutmeg, bombazine, and attic are words found only in Moby Dick. Ammunition, buccaneer, admiralty, and confront, only in Dickinson. Aquatic, arrogant, manacle, and exterminate, Dickinson. Daintiness, mulberries, punch bowl, and jam, Moby Dick. I'd like to finish with a last, longer poem in honor of this place. There is an American heritage of formal structure and devices that are at once abstract and graphical, a heritage equally of American science and American poetry. Two originators of these devices, contemporaries living in the Connecticut Valley, are Willard Gibbs, the country's first mathematical physicist, and Emily Dickinson. Gibbs in the mid-19th century devised visualizing methods which redefined the meaning of space. His contemporary, Dickinson, refused to title more than 1,700 poems and evolved singular methods of both production and punctuation. This poem is for them. Articulate among us. Emily Dickinson, Willard Gibbs. Never married, never moved from their family home. I am so potent, I can reach you only after wave upon wave of dilution. You will rediscover, but not read me. I have built a language to make my work more pure. A pure inquiry into unity has concerned this nation ever since it claimed independence through union. Cornerstones of the church on the green in New Haven, monuments to regicide. Dickinson, a fire bride, a bomb, a volcano, as alive or more so in the grave as out of it. Showing us this across the garden fence of the grave, speaking in the tomb, of the tomb, as of a ride, one of many, every poem, one of many no-name inquiries. But we have her numbered. Is Dickinson articulate? Did Higginson, Johnson, Franklin, would Bloom, if Bloom spoke of her, make her articulate? She said the grave gave her language. Whitman said the future, always sampling the future and listing the future. And Gibbs, a prisoner of his own unwillingness to auction his mind, who built a mathematic language to make his work more pure, who made it so pure it sublimed instantly into zones of power and remains enthroned there, isolated there. The supremely articulate among us. Amistad Africans, mutineers for freedom on the ship they commandeered, stole from the captain and steered by their own light and by starlight to a new world, a rock-bound coast, a world not wilderness alone, but wilderness with courts in it and canon and codes of presentation, a world of sacred language, their own language attacked, active virus, ancient knowledge that it was. They perplex. No translator, no way maker, no wizard wise woman sponsor, only the valley itself of the Connecticut River, who brought from itself, with the help of Sarah, Jonathan Edwards, a valley itself with its snow and snow water, so far from home. I am so potent, I can reach you only by submitting to wave upon wave of dilution. So potent, only I can reach you now, soon. Thank you.
And our final reader this evening is Susan M. Schultz. A native of Illinois, Susan M. Schultz is a graduate of Yale University. She did her graduate work at the University of Virginia. She has lived and taught in Hawaii since 1990, where she has edited Tin Fish Press, which publishes experimental poetry from the Pacific. Her book of essays is a poetics of impasse in modern and contemporary poetry, and works of poetry and poetic prose, including And Then Something Happened, Dementia Blog, and Memory Cards, which I'll say more later. She wrote a while back, this is everybody here who teaches poetry is going to respond, I think, knowingly. A few years ago, I was teaching a class on poetry and politics when my students got angry with me. I had just laughed at their stated ambition to make money writing poetry. Ha, ha, ha. My laughter, they informed me, in no uncertain terms, meant that I did not take them or their work seriously. This says everything, doesn't it, about the problems in this culture right now. Thank you. This day's lesson plan fell aside as I told them about the imbalance sheet of Tin Fish Press, about doing one's life work while losing buckets of money at it. Well, we certainly know about that. And hardest of all to fathom, why such a thing might be worthwhile. It says, believe me, it says everything. Her most recent book of poetry is I Want to Write an Honest Sentence, of which Eleanor Nowen, a featured reader at last year's festival, has written, the latest in Susan M. Schultz's ongoing cumulative epic is as gorgeous, far out, and effective as anything she's written. I love her deep but lightly held learning, her big heart, and that she's quotidian and funny. Our great poet of grief, Schultz is the calm at the center of storms of sorrow, confusion, loss, politics. Her sentences are so good they can make you, me, cry. My response to the death of a poet is to imitate his sentences like Matt Moore's throwing Daryl Kyle's curve 2 days after Kyle died. I have to add here, interject, that this very summer, Eleanor Nowen taught me baseball. Yeah, she took me to a baseball game, she sat beside me, and she said, now they're doing this. And I had no idea. Well, anyway, style's a form of grieving, one that threads out like a shawl over bent shoulders. This, like the whole book, has her distinctive smartness, precision, and just plain beautiful writing. And now something a little personal. Tonight is actually the second time I've seen Susan Schultz. The first time was about 25 years ago at a conference at my university. And I remember I went into the faculty room, and there she was. And I was just, you're Susan Schultz. Well, so good to see you. And then it has been 25 years since then. But in the meantime, I've read everything she's written, and she is fantastic. Best of all, the last 2 books she's written have been published by Talisman.
Yeah, Eleanor, who had that long epic poem about being in love with Derek Jeter, and then when she finally met him, she discovered he was sort of dull. So Eleanor's great. It's nice to be in this reading of SS's. Sarah, Stephanie, Susan, and I also write about Simone Weil. So there's lots of S's. Thank you so much for having me. I confess I'm a little jet lagged, but that's okay. So my husband sent me a text this morning with a photograph, and the photograph
was of the dumpsters near our house. And I said, that's funny, I took that photo too. And it's also on the cover of my memory card Simone Weil series, except this is a painting by a young Honolulu poet named Tommy Height. So I thought I would start with Simone Weil series. These are prose poems that begin from a random quotation by Simone Weil from her notebooks. All the natural movements of the soul are controlled by laws analogous to those of physical gravity. Grace is the only exception. Italics are inversions except where they're the rule. A woman was singing in MacArthur Park. She slung her arm around a pole as if to resist a strong wind. I noted men seated on benches beside her, tents on the other side of the park, objects placed on the sidewalk for sale across the street. The lyric is troubled when it speaks for more than one, but that's all we are on this sidewalk, or an umbrella. Depending on how it's lit, like her eyes or the melody Stein says is too seductive not to be avoided. At the airport, the man's shirt read, shredding a tidal wave of whiskey on a surfboard made of don't care. He kept leaping to his feet to dance, snapping fingers as he threw one arm across his body. He talked to no one listening, said he was moving back after 38 years, 15 in LA. I thought him the mythological homeless man put on a plane to Honolulu. After all, his carry-on was a tent. But he muttered something about Nanakuli. His gray hair matted, standard black glasses framed his dark crossed eyes. As we landed, his body surged in waves, arm thrown out, fingers snapping faster and faster. The flight attendant called him Brada. 11 April 2016. Also date. Time does us violence. It is the only violence. Near Disney World, her father screamed they were going to die if they didn't get the exit right. It's not time that confuses us, but place. There's no telling the squares apart, the one where you visit Mickey Mouse, or the other where your soldier gets blown up by an IED. Mickey lives in a safe house on the perimeter. Children rush to him as if he were the Pope in velvet slippers, gently touching the hems of his costume. But her father walks the kingdom's streets, knowing each house hides a man with a gun. Memory is a protectorate he left long ago. When she says she wants to write about this, he asks why. To save our family, she says. It's a small world, after all. 8 May 2016. Here's my baseball poem. The ticking of a clock has no rhythm. It is defined by the pauses. A ring is not round, but square. We puncture time with our presence, then squat on a corner stool. Actually, maybe it's a boxing poem. One man leans over to tend the cuts above our eye, another to scream instructions in our ear. You want to talk to who brought you here, my son says, not to someone who doesn't know you. Intimacy is of violence, mostly. He's so well armed he can't take the bus to Airsoft. Pores over pictures of pistols and automatic weapons, fake, of course, then puts on his camo and laces up his boots. Needs $15 to pay for the fantasy of killing his friends. I want to punch him in the face, Trump says of a protester. It's all part of the game, says the ball player who cold-cocked Jose Bautista. Only the man of violence can refuse to kill. A bell keeps tolling, but not for Ali. attend to the blank canvas where his feet once danced. 4 June 2016. No one will remember the shoe, a friend writes, the one soaked in Orlando's blood. History's obscurities rhyme, that shoe with an abandoned shoe on a Paris street. I associate terror with shoes. On the trail yesterday, a man held 2 souls in his hand near the waterfall, but that was only a walk in the woods. My girl shed her shoes, walked barefoot in the pool beneath the falls. I love you, babe, the shooter texted his wife. Men in the bathroom stall saw his boots pace beneath the floor. My first word was shoes, though it might have been Sue's. Hey, babe, my son says to his girlfriend. He got new shoes. The last pair were just for looks. One cat cuddles with my daughter's cleats. Memory is inventory before it assigns affect to object. We live in a state where you take your shoes off before you walk in. 20 June 2017. This is Vey quoting George Herbert, I think. So quote, and then italics. Love took my hand and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? The palm at the end of the mine stands right outside my window. Men climb, take machetes to its coconuts. One cut a spoon out of the coconut's crown and handed it to my son. He ate its meat. Yesterday, my daughter's sister watched. There was no meat, but she took our word. Bananas come in hands, beneath them a heavy heart. To attend is to love, but not to want. Love apart from blood is syllable and sound. Love best what you're not like. 30 June 2016. Okay, the I Want to Write an Honest Sentence cover is also from Tommy Height of Honolulu, who is a bartender at the Manifest Whiskey Bar, which I recommend if you go to Chinatown in Honolulu. And so here is his cover for I Want to Write an Honest Sentence. I woke up one day in the current administration with the sentence, I want to write an honest sentence in my head. And I thought, oh, I'll write that prose poem, and then I just kept writing them, and they all begin, I want to write an honest sentence. In case you notice the repetition. Okay. So here we go. I want to write an honest sentence. Someone asked what it's called when you keep starting over in the same way. Surely there's a name for this, other than obsession or compulsion or strange insistence. We tell those stories that make us feel better, and this is mine. Once upon a time, the word fragility meant we weren't to drop a box or push a glass off the countertop. After leaving the station of fact, our word wandered into a courtroom. A lawyer argued that she was easily broken, that he couldn't handle being questioned, that they denied the privilege they wore on their heads like Sunday hats. Our prose grew more and more heavy until not only would it not break, but it turned immovable, like a bronze statue in a park. Who that man was mattered to us, but how we transposed him into words did not. They rained on us like rubber bullets. Our parkas frayed and fell apart, fabric scattering like feathers the dog tore up. One man grabbed a woman's ass while another raped her. According to a spokesman, the first one who admitted it was guilty, and the second one who did not wasn't. Words hang like donuts on a president's finger as he jabs the air. Turned out he was lying, but we couldn't decide how much that mattered to us. The men I love are good men, but they're fragile. how to reach out with all the delicacy I can muster and pull them down from their perches or out from under their beds. What are the words I need to use that are light as air and cleansed of judgment? How can I make the word true again? After his uncle's stepson killed himself on Veterans Day and a girl fell to her death outside the restaurant where he edited a poem, he told us he was broken. A crushed glass is sometimes truer in the light than one that still sits on the shelf. 19 November 2017. That actually was a Facebook post by Sherwin Bitsui about being in the cafe when this person dropped by the window. I want to write an honest sentence. A saw cuts my thought in half, though both ends show outside the box. Thought's an appendage, but what occurs inside the box is not. Is not is assertion and denial in two short syllables. The saw would cut them in half, leaving a pile of light brown dust. What feeds the trees in the rainforest is the dust from Mongolian desert. What feeds the dust is another question. I see from one side of the box and wiggle my toes at the other. If sawdust makes me sneeze, I perhaps will die of being cut. But to read the box as meaningful is to take it as central to the story, succumbing to the saw. Once upon a time there was a box. Once upon a time it sat upon a stage and people watched as it was cut in half. The piercing of the saw was not entertainment, but something more precious. It was what happened while not happening, the separation of the box from itself. The box is a turtle shell that shields beings from consequence. Head cannot think its way inside the box to cradle heart and liver, ease the pain of seeming to be cut. Death would be a poor performance, but life is not. The handmaid saw a sheet that wore a tulip stain of blood and knew a man had died. The other sheets were blank, like petticoats lacking ink. 26 December 2017. And this would seem to be my sex poem. Don't get your hopes up. I want to write an honest sentence. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, men and women embrace AR-15s, wear golden Burger King crowns as they renew their vows. A white dress signifies lack of wound, virginity in the Anthropocene. The building where a massacre unfolded will be torn down, boost to the local economy. Doing and undoing participate in the same dance, making harm in order to unmake mortar, as if to replace the building were to take away its history. My mother asked where the Bastille was, and someone pointed to the ground. I wonder about the flowers left on H3 beside the drop. When a woman at the retirement home said none of the windows opened, another, an Englishwoman with a French name, muttered, "They don't want us committing suicide." Her name means flower. I saw a young man on the shoulder at that spot, his eyes broken, but I can't read words written on the pole in black marker. To wound is to make blossom. The exit from an AR-15 is the size of an orange. I take this gun to be my legally wedded spouse. I take it in my bed and perform erotic feats, nuzzling it as it warms to my touch. The spawn of my gun will have trigger finger and a perpetually open mouth. It will suck my teat until I run out of magazines, then point its tiny head at me and explode. What a sicko. 1 March 2018. I took a visit to the Big Island with Martha Reed shortly before she died. And it was a wonderful visit. And we went to the Kapoho tide pools, which were these beautiful places to snorkel. And oh, she was so happy to be there. And the Kapoho tide pools no longer exist either because the eruption on the Big Island shortly after Martha died also erased the Kapoho tide pools. So her husband Mike became obsessed with the Kapoho tide pools and the lava flow. And so this poem comes from a photograph he took in his house while he was first grieving for her. I want to write an honest sentence about the photo of an empty chair to the other side of a dark wooden table. The viewer sees a bowl of cereal and a spoon, its handle set to the right of an avocado green bowl, thick white mug of black coffee, half full, between bowl, placemat of mixed colors, and empty chair. Beside the place setting, opposite a mussed-up cloth napkin. Windows behind the empty chair are blank in early light, a barely visible tree trunk more resembling falling tears than bark. Bryant picked up a thread of Pele's hair from a bed of moss, placed it on his palm beneath his ring. Ring dwarfs hair. One end of the thread is bright silver, the other a tear above a tail of curling black ash. It resembles a tiny hockey stick. His bicycle tires kick up volcanic grit, and the air smells of sulfur. He turned on a video of Fisher 20 just as the beds started to shake. Arrived at Volcano Golf Course when the first explosion happened. His photo comes after the second boom, gray cloud trailing steam. The sky is otherwise blue and clear. Puna's coastal road was closed last night. Lava has reached the sea, sending up clouds of toxic steam. Remember when we walked past the end of Chain of Craters Road, molten red flowing into the deep blue water, and whales blue columns of into air. 20 May 2018. I'd like to finish with a kind of a, it's a poem, and it's not by me, it's by two other people that I cobbled together for, and this was another cover that I love. This was the second volume to my dementia blog. The book is called She's Welcome to Her Disease, and so the photo album is washed out. The designer was Gay Chan, and then there's a memory box on the back, like the memory boxes in Alzheimer's homes. But this poem is cobbled together with lines from Thomas DiBaggio's wonderful memoir, Losing My Mind, an intimate look at life with Alzheimer's, and George Oppen, a George Oppen poem. It doesn't say which one, but I think this was the poem where if you go to Penn Sound, the best part of it is not the poem itself. It's when he's introduced and he gets up there and he says, "Have I already read the poem or are we drowned?" Because he had Alzheimer's at the point at which he was giving the reading. So the other person says, "No, you haven't read your poem." So he reads the poem quite beautifully. DiBaggio Oppen, an Alzheimer's writing experiment. Never the chess game, the checker game. The words are under control, but letters squirm. Juggler, why need I invent so much? I have searched for potent words in the backyard, tongueless. Words dance away seductively on the beach in the hissing surf. I don't know, I have to be careful. Tiger still burning in me, burning. I can spell the word dying, but I do not know what it means. To become old, the innocence. I am someone else looking at me. The old man in the mirror startles me, but the young man in the photograph is stranger still. I struggle to spell the word hour and cannot bear to speak. Cut my legs off, but don't take away my ability to write. You cannot imagine, he said, what has been happening to me. I am unconsciously mixing words, hour and out, would and would, me and be. The saving ray of strangeness, saving ray of exile, ray of darkness, I will sing until no word is left. Lost and fearful, I wake up hiccuping with fear. I dreamed one night I was in a house near here, though I cannot find it. I was lost, and they could not quite guide me, wandering foreigner. Alzheimer's is like trying to describe air. The finches yell, us, 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 us. Does their language contain them? I must now be done with writing and lick words instead, whereupon curious archangels begin to watch. Saturday, January 29th, 2011. Thanks very much.
See you tomorrow evening. Please.